I like Excel and retro computer games, so I've decided to combine the two. This is the Battle of Stalingrad in Excel format, the recreation of the 1974 arcade game Tank. No special Excel functions, no VBA code and no macros, just logic, lookups and arithmetic. Way before Sega vs Nintendo was the first computer game rivalry, Atari vs Kee. Atari's arch-rival Kee Games had poached Atari's staff and was cloning Atari's games. Like Elimination, a clone of Atari's 4-player version of Pong, Quadra-Pong. Can you spot the difference? Tank, though, was an original Kee Games creation, advertising itself as being a realistic simulation of genuine tank combat. In another first, this was the first video game nasty. Kee described Tank as enabling players to violently attack each other while remaining within the limitations of social acceptability. The aim of the game was for the black tank to fire at the white tank, while the white tank did the same back. In the arcade game, there was a maze and a minefield to navigate, but in this video, I'm just concentrating on the tank battle. As usual, I prepare the row and column references outside the gameplay area. These references are counting up in 1 and 16. This is because the game graphics are in a 16x16 grid. The next set of references track the motion of the tanks and the shells in the X direction, then the same in the Y direction. The tanks had to be different colours so that you could tell the players apart. So to avoid any camouflage, the background was grey. In yet another first, Tank was one of the first games to load its graphics into memory, which paved the way for games to have more complex graphics. Let's run through a few more Tank firsts. It was the first, possibly only game to release a sequel within the same month as the original. Tank was the first game franchise to become a trilogy, with Tank 3 being released in 1975. Tank was also the first game franchise to skip numbers and go from Tank 3 to Tank 8, which was an 8-player version of the game. As you turned your tank, the graphics changed, depending on the profile. Each of these profiles was stored in memory. Tank, like a lot of games of the time, used symmetry to save on memory space. Tank loaded each of the 16 aspects into memory and used logic to flip these images for the remaining 16 aspects. Each Tank arcade machine was delivered to the amusement arcade with an operating manual. This manual explained to the owner how he could make certain changes to the gameplay. Tank was a beat-the-clock game. For 25 cents, you and your friends could have 134 seconds of tank-destructive fun, getting a point for each hit and the winner having the highest score. However, the arcade machine had a controllable timer, so the arcade owner could reduce each game from over 2 minutes to a measly 24 seconds. The arcade machine owner also had control over the distance that the shell could travel, but only from the white tank. Over the lifetime of the machine, the distance of the shells wouldn't stay consistent, so an honest owner could tweak the range of the white shell to keep it in line with the range of the black shell. But a dishonest owner could tinker with the white shell, making player 1 far stronger than player 2. The shell has 4 settings: not yet fired, in motion, and 2 explosion settings for animating the exploded shell. The shell explodes when it hits the enemy tank or when it reaches the limit of its range. I've got all the images ready like pages in a flickbook. Now to add the functionality to select the right page. The 2 tanks animate in the same way, except one is black and one is white. I've set up the conditional formatting so that 1 is black and 2 is white. When the tank gets hit, it flashes in inverse, like this. A not statement inverses the output of the formula, so a 0 becomes 1 and vice versa. And I'll add in the shell functionality as well. The black tank fires black shells and the white tank fires white shells. I've built the graphics for my gladiators, now it's time to throw them in the ring. The functionality of the tanks is identical, but they are different colours and they move independently. And here it is, the formula for tank. Using name ranges makes it really clear which component relates to which tank and which shell. In 2009, the UK Christmas #1 was expected to be yet another X Factor winner. However, after a successful online campaign, Killing in the Name Of reached the top spot, selling 500,000 copies, 50,000 more than that year's X Factor winner Joe McElderry. One song was owned by Sony, and the other song was owned by Psycho, a subsidiary of Sony. The same happened with Atari and Kee. Great lengths were taken to create a public rivalry between Atari and Kee, fueled by Kee cloning Atari's games and poaching Atari staff. But why? In the early 70s, arcade machine distributors insisted on exclusivity deals, so Atari had to pick one distributor to get its game into the arcade halls of America. So Atari cloned itself. Atari gave the pretense that Kee was a separate company to get around the exclusivity deals. Kee only existed to be a clone of Atari. But Kee didn't want to be just a clone. Kee created an original game in Tank and ran an efficient business at a time when Atari was struggling financially. By the mid-1970s, the distributor's exclusivity deals were no more, so Atari didn't need to keep Kee separate anymore, and they merged. Once fierce rivals were allies, former Atari staff were again Atari staff. Let's see Tank in action one more time. Thanks for watching Tank in Excel, and don't forget to like and subscribe.